Welcome to the Old Mac Gang, and kind of a special week here this week. We, amongst ourselves, could not stop talking about what was going on with WWDC, the Worldwide Developers Conference, that's still going on. But it was the big keynote on Monday that got us talking, trying to figure out what the implications are. And I don't want to say this is going to feel a little too over anybody's head, but we're going to go through some of what we thought were the interesting pieces and maybe a little bit about how that fits in with our demographic, our well-seasoned Apple users. So let's find out who's on the panel tonight. I'm Marty Gensius, a professor, podcast, and creator of the podtalk.net. So let's see, Chris.
Yeah, hey, I'm Chris. I'm a 78-year-old retiree for another 2 weeks here in Tucson, Arizona, member of the Tucson Mac User Group, which you'll hear more about in a minute. And I've been around the Mac since '84 and worked at Apple and, done university IT. And now I'm retired with all my Apple toys, having lots of fun. And, what a week. I mean, being a software support guy by trade, I was in hog heaven this week, although a tad confused. So we'll say more as we're going along. Peter?
Yeah, I'm Peter. I'm 73 years old. I'm an Apple enthusiast from Bay Village, Ohio. I used to be a foundryman and an educator, and now I'm retired. And I've been gung-ho using computers and gadgets since high school, Apple hardware for about 25 years. I love chatting about all the gear and software that I'm using, or the gear and software I wish I was using with this old gang and our audience. So this week, I guess it's going to be wish I were using as we wait for all this stuff to roll out. Charlie.
Hi, I'm Charlie Lindahl from Houston, Texas, 70 years old, retired from A&M after 23 years and doing IT. And I've been around the Apple stuff for many years, including starting in 1984. And I supported Macs and other technologies while I was at A&M. I have most of the Apple toys. I'm about ready to bite the bullet and get a MacBook Pro M5 to start doing AI stuff. So I'm very interested in looking at the Siri stuff, which we'll talk about later. So Bob?
Good evening. I'm Bob Wood. I'm also in Tucson. And good evening, good morning, good day, whatever it is when you happen to be watching this. I have been a Mac User Group member and leader for something like 30 years. But I'm not getting old. So I'm going to turn it over to Marty to bring us into our topics.
Yeah, so we're talking about WWDC and the Worldwide Developers Conference. The conference is geared towards developers, people who are going to write software to run on Apple devices. But it is also Apple's opportunity to kind of share what the new operating system is going to look like and ways in which developers can write software to fit in with the new operating system. So everybody gets a little bit of a Christmas here in June. As consumers, we get to hear about how the operating system is going to function. In particular this year, it's Siri AI, or I think so we don't trigger everybody's devices, we'll just call it SAI. And that was a big piece of the talk, and we'll talk about that tonight and what it means. But there are other things that were revealed, a lot about parent-child, child protection and safety using Apple devices, things about looking at making corrections in what the platform is going to look like in terms of design, and then lastly some app-specific kinds of things that were mentioned during WWDC and integration with app-specific kinds of things. So Freeform and Safari and some of the base Apple apps that are going to be part of the integration. So we have got a long list of summary articles. I don't know, looks like there's about 10 or 12 links, stories from Engadget, Tom's Guide, TechCrunch, Digital Trends, Tech Republic, all of these kind of summarizing what's going on with WWDC in terms of the keynote announcements. So you can go back and these URLs, the links will be in the show notes. So if you're watching this, look for the show notes on YouTube. And if you're listening to it, look for the show notes as you look at the information on whatever pod server that you're using. So kind of major things they talked about. The first thing they talked about was some changes in design and also what they say under the hood changes, things that you wouldn't see, but you might experience. And Chris is going to take the lead on this. So Chris, why don't you give our listeners, viewers, a little bit of some of the major kinds of announcements that fit in under design?
Sure, Marty. So just to reiterate, the developer conference is always primarily for developers, and it is a software show. Tim Cook led off, handed off to Craig Federighi, the senior VP of software, and that was it. There weren't any hardware people there. So as Marty's put here in his section 1, we're looking at this from two perspectives tonight. Design is sort of the outside. It is the user interface. It's what people see. It's, using the Siri app, shortcuts, etc., versus the internals, the inside, under the hood. And this gets into stuff like the user experience, how the Spotlight Index works to power all this AI backbone, and, the importance of partnership with third-party apps with Apple Intelligence. As one of the senior VPs was talking about this morning in a session, it is like a partnership that the third-party apps become more powerful through Apple Intelligence, and Apple Intelligence in turn becomes richer through the connection with the third-party apps. So this is something very much under control and of the app developers, how much they adopt, how much goes to the cloud, how much doesn't. There's been a lot of discussion about that. And is this, the whole thing, what is the situation with, say, Google Gemini? And the reality seems to be, from what we can distill, that Apple has sort of combined their frameworks with Google's, but it's still a uniquely Apple experience, and it's still totally privacy protected the way Apple stuff almost always is. So with that out of the way, let's hit these topics. First of all, the whole liquid glass situation. And what one of the sessions I listened to was on accessibility with folks with various challenges and limitations. And one of the people on the panel was blind, and she was talking a lot about, liquid glass just threw them a huge curveball because, or not for people totally blind, but for people with low visibility. Whenever readability comes up as an issue, they get hit hard because, they've only got very limited visibility to read in the first place. And so, that was a big change this year in terms of finally we have a slider that's system-wide for controlling the transparency of liquid glass. I suppose we couldn't do it last year because for various structural reasons, but now we have it, and it seems to be pretty effective from what I can tell. And yes, as Marty's put down here, you can almost completely turn it off. So for folks who don't like liquid glass, you can go pretty much back to the way it was before. Other things involve things like the toolbar, where they had broken off the little magnifying glass for search to be a separate element. They brought that back and unified it with the toolbar. So excuse me. So it was all the same level, and a lot of performance numbers in terms of improvements. People who have been running this stuff say yes, they have seen that, and I'll touch on that in a minute. Um, the next Mac OS is going to be called Golden Gate. There have already been some jokes about that in terms of AI kind of locking people into the Apple infrastructure with a Golden Gate. Um, it is goodbye to Intel in the sense that the old Intel Macs will not be able to run it. However, on the software side, the Rosetta 2 that enabled apps that had Intel code that use the Rosetta emulation will be able to run for another year. I actually went through this exercise with an app that I didn't even know had Intel code, but lo and behold, so it does, and that'll be good for another year. Search, totally rebuilt from the ground up, and this is where it can really make a difference with things like mail and photos in the operating system. Um, Accessibilities is the last area I'll touch on here. VoiceOver got a huge improvement, and to the accessibility community, that's really important. Um, AI generated instructions um, of images and being able to see the stuff on screen, like being able to say, open the purple folder as opposed to open element 12 and open Bob's report instead of item number 6. Uh, Things like this are making a huge difference. And as in the disability session I watched, that they pointed out over and over again, these are things that benefit a lot of us. And as Charlie has already asked and may say more, some of this is overlapping into the senior community. And what does that mean for our audience, our demographic? Um, so I think that's all I've got. What do you think, Peter?
Well, when I heard you talk about performance and when I heard the keynote speakers spending a decent amount of time on performance, I just thought, hooray. Uh, and let's hope that that giant list of all the items that went by so fast it dazed me comes true. A better index for better searching everywhere sounded like the biggest thing I heard. And it also sounds pretty sweet. Search has been frustrating in many spots in the Apple ecosystem, and I will be grateful for every improvement, little or big. And again, fingers crossed that it ends up being big. I kicked on the developer beta yesterday. Everything's still indexing, so it looks to me like they're doing a big job re-indexing stuff. And I also hope for lots of API action from developers. It is a developers conference, and I didn't notice any big unfunded mandates, work that developers need to do just to stay where they already are. And last year with Liquid Glass and having to redo a lot of interface elements, I think a lot of the developers spent 70, 80% of their programming time this last year just making sure things work right with that, and not much time on new features this year. I'm hoping they'll get to new features. What do you think, Marty?
Well, I tell you, my first reaction to the liquid glass thing was, now will all the whiny liquid glass people stop complaining because change is hard and maybe move on to something else that they don't like, which I'm sure they'll find. I'm excited about the performance enhancements. I have not. Well, I put the developer version on a couple of devices, but primarily I have been working on my desktop through the day, and as a result, I haven't seen the kind of performance leaps yet. I'm constantly trying to do things with SAI or trying to evoke SAI, and it's not quite working there yet. And who knows? All of this stuff is not going to roll out on beta 1. It might roll out on beta 2, 3, 4. But these are the things that we're talking about are things that supposedly are going to be in the OS 7. The design issues and changes with the design issues outside of liquid glass I don't notice those things as much as other people do who are like, yeah, we need to get this all consistent or else it won't work. Well, it does work. It's just not consistent. So this was the least exciting portion of the presentation. I did hear that that a lot of developers were upset with the fact that this keynote seemed to be focused not on developers, but on introducing the new platform for the general consumers. But at the same time, all week long, all of the different presentations are focused on developers, and also the idea that the developers are getting lots of goodies in terms of APIs. I hear that Apple is providing them with lots of tool sets to work with. So, and then there's the whole AI integration into developing, which we can talk about when we get to the AI portion.
I'm really sorry to see that my MacBook Air isn't going to support iOS 27. That's my workhorse when I go away from home. I have a MacBook Pro at home, but I may have to get another MacBook Pro anyway. But anyway, sad to see that the Intel going away. And I'm wondering what the effect is going to be on the market, because there are a lot of people that I know that have the Intel stuff. And I understand they're going to be continuing to do the security patches anyway. And I really don't care about liquid glass. It doesn't really make a difference to me. I don't get excited about it or disappointed or anything. I'm also really interested about search capability and what the benefits are of search. I'd really like to see if they have more extensive ways of doing the search, like date ranges, plural, which I haven't been able to figure out how to do. Let's see. And last thing, I'm curious to see if any of these features, particularly the voice stuff, will extend to CarPlay or not.
Well, personally, I'm delighted to see the slider for opacity. When it was first announced last year, there was so much negativity coming from the blogosphere that when I did install macOS 26 in late 2025, I was reduced to the grumpy old man shouting, "Get off my lawn." I cannot say that I've come full circle, but far enough to say I'm kind of getting used to it. So I've made my peace with that. Better system-wide search will always be welcome. I try to use a predictable file structure, but sometimes things do elude me. I don't use much from accessibility, but I know it's there. And if I have trouble doing something or think maybe accessibility is the answer, I know I can always ask Chris, because he's so much more on top of that than I am. So over to Peter in section 2.
Let's talk about parental controls and screen time. Child safety dominated what Apple called trust and safety. Apple introduced new parental controls and child safety features that allow parents to set up child accounts with age-appropriate protections. It allows the parents to control app access and approve new contacts and use communication safety tools that can detect and intervene when explicit or violent content is shared. Child accounts are technically required by Apple now for users under 13 and available up to age 18. And it enables system-wide protections from the moment of device setup throughout the use of all of their different devices. And these content controls are notably more granular than before. Parents can choose exactly what apps a child can access. And with Ask to Browse enabled, they can approve each new website a child visits. And time allowances set category level limits for entertainment, games, and social media, and also have daily schedules, which restrict which apps are available by time of day and day of week. Now, requesting and granting permission for these kinds of things are designed to be fast. A child's website request appears directly in messages on the parent's device, where the parent can review and approve it on the spot. And the parents can grant time extensions on request or temporary access without permanently changing a child's limits. And Apple has set up a set of suggested limits for children of different ages by referencing different things like the Association for Pediatric Health and things like that. Communication safety, which already blurs detected nudity in messages and FaceTime, will now also block gore and violent content. Now, this is the developers conference. So for developers, new frameworks extend safeguards to third-party apps, and they have things called sensitive content analysis, permission kit, things that trigger parental contact approvals, declared age ranges, all kinds of things like that. Now, this timing of this set of announcements tracks regulatory pressures that the United Kingdom gave to Apple and Google. They gave both of them a 3-month deadline for device-level explicit image controls. And the Kids Online Safety Act is worming its way through our Congress. These features answer that legislation, and it also answers critics who argue that unrestricted screens and social media are fueling a youth mental health crisis. Now, what does this mean for old gangers like us? Our kids are grown up for the most part, but we have grandkids, we have nieces, we have nephews, we have neighbors. Being aware of this stuff and being aware what the effect of too much screen time or social media might do to a person makes it something that we want to be aware of, I think, and maybe involved with, and serving as guides, as wise old men and women often do. Chris, what do you think?
Well, I've been following this through some of my grandkids, and they would start out with like an iPod Touch, or one of them started out with a cellular Apple Watch that could text mom back and forth, and that was about it. And obviously, internet content was a driver in some of these things, and so there's a lot of peer pressure in various grades, like, oh, all my classmates are getting iPhones for their birthday this year. What am I going to get? Kind of thing. So there's a lot of peer pressure around that. And I think Marty's going to have more to say about this. But, the whole concept of having a manage my iPhone, if you were, from the parent level seems like a really good idea. And Apple's really thought it through. I think it was the American Academy of Pediatrics, if I recall correctly, that anyway, it's some, body, the independent body that's really thought about setting this stuff up. And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. My one question is, how taxing is it going to be on the parent? Or is one parent going to be delegated to deal with this? Or what happens if that parent is not available in a meeting at work or whatever? I think that's something that parents will have to hash out, but at least they've got the tools to be able to do that. And it's been a subject for years that we've all known has been something we should do something about, and now we are. One quick funny story. One of my professors at work had included her daughter in her iTunes account. So all's fine and dandy. She's buying music and all this stuff. Well, finally, at age 24, the mother and daughter come in and say, I think we need to split this into 2 accounts. And I said, I could see why. Well, it turned out to be darn near impossible. And as far as I know, the daughter got her own account but lost all her history. in terms of everything she'd ever purchased because it was purchased under another account. And every single one of those songs was tagged, as they all are, with the purchase information with no way to change. So, funny things happen on the way to the forum. Marty?
Yeah, I am. My thoughts on this, I think Peter is already alluded to. First of all, I'm glad I'm not a parent of a young child because I can imagine the amount. Well, I can imagine the amount of effort that I would have to go through to manage this. I think this is a great PR move for Apple. I think it sends a message to the public community that Apple cares about this stuff, and they have obviously put a great deal of effort into putting this system together, doing it with the American Pediatrics College, and just a great granular sort of way of working and parents having control of their kids' phones in terms of access and age appropriate access. So hooray for Apple. I'm glad they did it. I think it's a great public PR move. I think it's the right thing. And it speaks to Apple's sort of culture around protection, privacy, and security and safety. But I'm not kidding myself. I think what Apple did was get ahead of the curve on this, that they have set up a system so they don't have to be a net nanny. And I'm afraid as these regulations start to roll out, Apple has now got a wonderful process to say, look, this is what we've done. It's in the hands of parents. So we don't have to do it at our level. Parents can take responsibility and do it at their level. And we gave them all the tools to do it with. So I think it was a brilliant move by Apple. They have the ecosystem that can do it. I don't know if Google has that kind of ecosystem that will allow them to do that without making lots of changes in their structure and adding in lots of other controls into what their current system is. I can't speak to Android, but I presume they would be stuck with the same thing. So when the government comes knocking and they are required to do something about it, I think Apple's in a very safe, secure, and really pro-consumer position with what they've done here. So that's kind of my take on it. And Charlie.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see if parental controls will give us a mechanism, users, particularly people who support older folks, to try and shut down certain capabilities of the phone and make it easier for seniors by shutting down things like the ability to load apps, for example. And I also think that same thing could be applied to the who can they call and who can call them. And I would think it would help a lot with the senior situations. And I had been talking in previous podcasts about doing a series on senior technology. Senior Planet was the thing that I covered before from ARP. And I could add the parental controls as one of the topics in that. So that could be very interesting. Bob?
Well, before I switch into grumpy old man mode, I first want to state that child safety and parental controls are vital. However, I feel that the presentation of this topic in the keynote leaned too far to the side of let the S lady keep your child safe in all of these wonderful ways. Ain't it great? And oh, by the way, there are some built-in parental controls that the parents can adjust. My feeling is it should be the other way around. In today's society, parents seem to place the blame for their children's misbehavior on teachers, schools, and government, and not on the fact that they're not doing their parenting jobs. As in my day, if I brought home a note from the teacher, my mother wouldn't be angry with the teacher. She would be disappointed and angry at me. And I think the way that Apple framed it is the way Apple framed it, this only reinforces the misconception that the parents are free to blame others for their children's issues. I will now step down from my soapbox, which is just another reference that no one under 50 can understand, and hand it off to Marty for Section 3.
Well, Section 3 is going to be on SAI. This is a overhaul, and for the last 2 years, the last two WWDCs, Apple's been really taking it on the chin in terms of what they promised in the WWDC 2 years ago that they didn't deliver over the year. And they overpromised in the sense of having a contextual-based system. Well, this is sort of what they came up with. And I think about it in a lot of ways. I am a heavy user of AI services, and for the last 2 years, people have been claiming, why can't Apple, with all its money, make an LLM like ChatGPT or Perplexity or with something like Claude or any of the other ones that are available. And that's because Apple had never had an intention of making something like that. And so, people have been wanting Apple to make this AI that is competitive with these other LLMs. And Apple, that was never, I think, Apple's intent. They didn't. And then people were saying, well, why don't they just buy one? And there are rumors that they were going to buy one. Well, what they did instead was they created an on-device model that's called Foundation or AI Foundation or something like that. And the idea there was, no, they didn't purchase Gemini. They got into a contract agreement with Gemini to help them produce this model, which runs in the Apple ecosystem and has all sorts of guardrails on it. So this is rebuilt as a conversational AI assistant, closer to what ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude do, but it is Apple-based. The way I think about it is now if I'm using AI, what I have, and I have content that's in my email or that's in my photos or that's in any of my Apple apps, what I have to do is open the email up, copy it, paste it into Claude, tell Claude what I want to do with it, and want it to do with it, then work it until it creates what I want. Then I take it and copy and paste the results back in my email. What they demonstrated at WWDC was all of that's going to be integrated on device. So I can say, find that email from Chris where he had some ideas he wanted to work on, and they'll find the email, they'll open it up in Mail. Then it's like, reply to Chris. These are the things that I want you to include in the reply. It will generate an email within a reply with that kind of context on device, in Mail, and be able to then send that out as it needs to be sent out for Chris, but all within the Apple ecosystem. I'm not going out to use other LLMs. Anyways, here's what's going on with Siri. It's not an incremental update. It's been rebuilt, as an AI assistant. It's powered in part by Google Gemini, but under the hood. And the arrangement with Google talks about privacy, so it's not going out and being used by Google in terms of data, and they have that arrangement. Apple actually challenged people and said, we'll give you $1 million bounty if you can show how this had been violated in the way it's been violated in. You can search through your messages, find a friend address, and retrieve information you were texted. It can pull from your emails, calendar events, and photos to answer questions. It's kind of really very cool, the different kinds of things it's going to be able to do. There's a new dedicated Siri app that is part of it, and a standalone Siri app. I've played with it. I have it on my systems, and I'm trying to open it. It's not quite smart yet, but it works, and it's interesting. Siri AI can write, edit, and proofread emails, messages, and notes. It adapts its tone to the context of your emails and how you have done emails before. You can speak or type prompts and revisit past conversations. Mail gets suggested actions based on the message contents. So SAI is going to be doing that. Now, not every device is getting the feature. It's only going to be some advanced capabilities like expressive voices, advanced dictation. They're limited to newer hardware. And Siri AI launches as a beta this fall in English only, other languages to follow. It's available across iOS, iPadOS, macOS, and VisionOS. VisionOS has kind of a floating orb in the field of vision that will allow that to happen. You opt in and you choose to enable it. So that's another aspect that's pretty cool. For folks our age, the conversational interface removes the need to remember exact commands. You can ask things in plain language, and writing assistance is generally useful for crafting emails when words are hard to find. And the personal context feature means that it can help you find things that you know you have, but you can't locate. So big advances in the AI field, and definitely a different AI than what we're used to, and kept within the context of your device and your privacy. So that's what's coming and what's new with AI on all the OS 27s. Chris.
Yeah, I have to admit I've been a little bit skeptical, since I'm not going to see any of this running on my own devices until the public beta comes out next month. And then I heard that, well, you've really got to have the iPhone 17 to, get all the latest stuff. However, there will be sort of what do we want to call it, a declining scale about what's going to be available in various models. And they went all the way back to the iPhone 11. So kudos for that. But I watched a Mac Rumors show today that is the two principal guys having just in conversation for 45 minutes. And I mean, just a quick preamble to this. These guys have been really hard on Apple for the past 2 years, not in an overly negative way, but just very methodically about here's all the things that are wrong. Here's all the things that need to get fixed. Are they going to do this? Boy, it's a tall order, blah, 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 blah. Well, the latest show, I mean, these guys just had a total turnaround, and they're both really impressed by what they've seen. They're impressed by all the little changes that Apple's been making, and they started listing them off. And I thought, well, listening to them with their impressions, it made it sort of feel like, well, this is the biggest thing since Apple Silicon on Macs back in 2020. Or maybe to use a guitar analogy, it's like Jimmy Van Halen said, there's guitar before Hendrix and then there's guitar after Hendrix. So is agentic computing going to be the same way? Admittedly, this is going to be cumulative. And, we may not be able to appreciate this for a year or two until all of it, because obviously, when you set it up, AI's got to crawl your device I mean, literally read every email, every message, and to be able to have an affinity for that. And that's what they're trying to do. Um, but there may come a time 3 or 4 years from now, or even 2 years from now, that we look back on a machine running, OS 26 or earlier and go, oh, it can't do that. Oh, wait, where's this? Oh, how about that? That the whole AI thing make it so ingrained that it's just sort of information at our fingertips as we're going along. And in ways that a lot of us haven't thought about, because it's really not the chatbot metaphor. It's not the external thing like ChatGPT or Perplexity, or, this is a real different thing in terms of what is agentic computing and how is it going to change things. And I must say that watching the panels in the developer conference today and yesterday, that the participants are really upbeat about this stuff and they're really proud of what they've done. So I think there's been a lot of work going on in Cupertino for the past 2 years that really is only now beginning to see the light of day. And for most of us, we may not see it till September. So, or whenever we, download the next OSs. But it's out there and it's growing. And, computing as we know it may never be the same. What do you think, Peter?
Well, I thought the pitch sounded wonderful in the keynote, even better than 2024, but the fallout from that year's broken promises is still with me. So I have a lot of questions, and I'm glad that this is rolling out already. I mean, a lot of the features they talked about were in the software when I downloaded it yesterday, and the standalone Siri app appeared to me about an hour ago. And I'm just wondering and hoping, that the details have been sweated the way they talked about it in the interface in different places. For example, I find that the previous AI from 2024, that when I asked for help with spelling, grammar, and phrasing, the interface was nowhere near as good as when I was writing something in a Google Doc, and I can sort of easily accept or reject improvements bit by bit as I work my way through the document. I tested the new version in Pages, and it's not really all hooked up in Pages yet to actually write stuff. I mean, it'll answer stuff, it'll give you suggestions, you can do a little bit of cut and paste, and it works. And I'm also curious to experiment with, when I jump to Siri for some quick info, how easy it is to copy and paste it or parts of it, and how Siri AI interacts with my content. Will it be only through Apple's App Intents framework? Will it be through screen scraping? Will it be through industry standard MCPs? When I looked around some of the different developer things, I see that there'll be the ability to write stuff not just to Apple Notes, but to other note-taking systems. I want to see these things gel in that nice, well-designed Apple way. That's what I'm hoping for. Inquiring minds need to know what's going to happen, and I'm out there keeping my ear to the ground. Charlie, what do you think?
First of all, I agree that I think the Google writing tools are still better than S-Ladies. The other thing I'll mention is that for our listeners, and we may tell about this earlier, what we're referring to with S-Lady and S-AI is so we don't pronounce SIRI, because it will trigger our version. Anyway, also, based on some articles I've seen, Apple will win at AI, and they already have, because they are able to choose which engine you want as the back end. Right now they're saying that Gemini is the premier, but you can actually choose in your AI stuff which engine you want to use. And what that means, and the reason Apple has won this particular battle, and this article that I read argues that Apple has won, period, is Apple is not going out and building these massive data centers. They're not spending $100 billion or $200 billion on these data centers. They're just relying on their competitors, the Anthropics and the Googles and the IBMs and the Microsofts, to go out and build all this hardware and have to maintain it and maintain the data centers. And Apple doesn't have that overhead, and they could take their pick of which thing they want to do. So I think that's an interesting, compelling argument. And we'll go to Bob.
Well, I'm going to be happy to explore many of these options when they are available to me and I have need for them. Being able to communicate with the AI conversationally will be great, especially with the safety and convenience that Apple is known for. I do have a suggestion to Apple. I'm sure they're listening. How about the ability to change the name of Sheila, SAI, or the S Lady to something of your own choice? That would be interesting to me. I'm going to throw it back to Charlie for section 4.
And section 4 is pretty extensive, and it'll be in the project notes for those that want to pick it up later. So I'm just going to read from some of the sections and make some comments, and then do our normal thing of having our panel be able to comment on them. The first piece is photos. There's a new slideshow maker, which I haven't used yet. There are new AI editing tools, including cleanup, which is remove unwanted devices or objects, extend the photo, spatial reframe. And the other thing that I found interesting is that there's a metadata that's attached to every single picture or image that's generated on the Macs and other places, called EXIF. But anyway, it makes a note that these things have been generated with AI. And I think having that as part of the metadata, meaning it goes with the photograph, is pretty impressive and very necessary. In the Safari world, I don't use Safari very much, but it is the native browser for all the Apple devices. There is a AI-powered tab organizer, and this I'm going to look at because, as is true with a lot of us users, we have 50 tabs open and we kind of get lost in where the heck there are. And to have a thing that automatically gathers them based on AI content is kind of interesting. There's a notify me feature for product restocks and price drops. So this is pretty interesting. And I'm wondering how well it ties into the Amazon apps. And anyway, I'm curious. I'm going to test that. Custom extensions can be user generated with AI tools, similar to shortcuts. That's for Safari. Kids can request permission to access a blocked mobile website directly through Safari, and it will ask the parent if they're allowing that. That's an interesting wrinkle in the parent control stuff. In Maps, the flyover has been very updated, and there's something called a local lists feature, which shows trending nearby restaurants and destinations using privacy-preserving insights. In health, new perimenopause and menopause support in cycle tracking, meaning in the Apple Health app. And it can do irregular period tracking. So they're really paying attention to a wide range of end users. In the messages, mail, and calendar feature section. Messages, there are new intelligence shortcuts for adding items to the calendar, notes, or finding related photos from conversations while you're in messages. That's going to be very useful for me. I'm really looking forward to playing with that. Surfaces suggested actions, subjects suggested actions based on message contents. So if you're looking at, for example, addresses, it will say, hey, do you want to see the map on this thing, as an example. And you can add things to the calendar using natural language. In the passwords realm, passwords can now autonomously navigate to vulnerable sites and upgrade weak passwords. This capability of changing passwords could be used to periodically update passwords, which is always a good idea. The fact that they're able to go out and say, hey, this password is weak and or you haven't changed it in 6 months, it will go ahead and automatically change it to be some long random string and make the password stronger. That's got to be a great feature for security. But notice it's only for for Apple's password manager. If you're on Apple devices, I use something called LastPass, which goes across all my devices. So I'm not sure whether I'm going to use this that much. In the Home app, which allows for which is the controller for all kinds of home-based stuff. They're going to have smarter notification handling. For example, security cameras. If you have a security camera, no matter what brand it is, they'll just bombard you with all kinds of notifications all the time, and it's very disconcerting on your phone. And apparently they've been able to make it more intelligent about how often it does it and what they consider to be important. And also security coverage footage can be summarized by AI. In the AirPods world, and I have some AirPods, the earpieces, custom EQ, equalization, is coming to AirPods, and that is really going to be welcome, particularly those of us that have existing hearing aids and are using the Apple ones instead for music and so forth. So that will be really good. Wallet, the Wallet app, which I use a lot, by the way, they finally figured out how to allow you to put different IDs that you have digitized into Wallet. So, for example, Texas is one of the states where you can't input your driver's license into Wallet. Now you will be able to. And I find it very useful to be able to input tickets for things that I've bought. Because that way I don't have to worry about carrying around tickets or tracking down emails or what have you. Under shortcuts, you can create shortcuts with natural language. Describe what you want, and S-Lady builds it. And I haven't tried that. So I will pass it on to Chris to get his impressions.
Yeah, Charlie, for any normal annual WWDC, this would be a really impressive list. And it might be enough of, I don't know, we can't call it red meat for software, but it's about the same, to keep a lot of people satisfied. I mentioned the Mac User Show, and they have tried out a lot of these things, and a lot of them are working right now in the first developer beta. And of course, it sort of comes with the territory, but it's going to take multiple iterations. That's why the software isn't released until September. And Apple gets a lot of feedback from us in terms of our usage and whether we use the developer betas or the public betas, for anyone not familiar with that. Of all of these, I would say the airport EQ is a big deal for me, and it was for several of the pundits, which really surprised me, folks I didn't expect. But right now, I stream about 90% from my hearing aids. They're really good at that. But they're concentrated in the range for human speech. So music kind of cuts out the highs and lows. And so I like to switch to AirPods, but the problem was they needed an EQ. There was the treble response was lousy. The contour wasn't very good, and which made comprehension difficult. And that's a big deal for me because I'm shifting a lot of my long, medium, and long reads into an app we talked about a couple of weeks ago called Matter, so that I get stuff read to me. Or Substack now lets you just about read all of the blog posts and have it read it to you and stuff. So when I'm on my iPhone, that's fine because the hearing aids pair to those. But when it comes to my Mac or my iPad, I have to switch to something else. So I either have the wired earbuds or hopefully the AirPods Pro. And so hence that is a big deal for me. Um, Overall, I definitely want to try everything out. I'm really excited to do that. I can't wait for the first public beta, probably a month from today in mid-July. The way time's going by, I'm sure it'll be here before we know it. Um, but like I've said before, my fingers are double crossed, as we used to say as kids, for the spotlight index, because that seems to be, the data backbone in all of this. And as your devices get crawled, all that information, the SLAD or SAI is going to accumulate in that greater spotlight index. And I've already rebuilt mine twice since January, so let's hope that isn't a more common occurrence because it does take a while. Um, Anything else? Oh, the one thing I will say is I'm sure going to miss the desktop pictures from Tahoe. So I don't know what they're going to give us on Golden Gate, but I might have to revert to the Tahoe pictures because they really were cool. Peter?
Yeah, there's 5 or 6 things that resonate with me. I'm already using a couple of the photo editing tools. Improved cleanup is indeed improved. I won't need to round trip it to some third party app as often as I have over the past years. And Extend, I think, is great. I've already used it to make or improve some iPhone wallpaper that I have. I like switching up wallpaper and background photos and things like that. So I think Extend is great. I look forward to testing out the Safari Notify Me. I hope it's better than the various third-party services I've used for this purpose with mixed results. I think right when you're looking at a web page to say, oh, I want to see if anything changes here and kick it off is just great. The agentic password app actions appeal to me. Maybe I'll finally make all of my passwords unique and strong. Right now, I only do that for high risk ones. And I like the idea of having them all a little more high strength. And vibe coded shortcuts. I think making shortcut creation frictionless is also brilliant. And not to mention the many other more basic improvements they've made to shortcuts to adapt it to the agents that they hadn't made so far. For whatever reason they make the improvements, great, make them. Oh, and I do think I'll be using EQ for AirPods. I haven't used it yet. I hope that maybe some feedback will get them to kick in more than 3 bands of it, but 3 is certainly better than none, and they can evolve to 5 maybe next year if 3 is all they'll give us this year. So those are the things that resonate with me. What about you, Marty?
I tell you, there's a lot of stuff in here. I'm not as excited about the EQ stuff because it's not going to help me with my tinnitus, from what I can tell. So how many bands doesn't really matter to me if there's constant ringing going on in my ears with this. So the EQ stuff although a lot of people are excited about it, the soundophiles who really are into that it never really crosses my mind as something that's exciting. I'll tell you something that I'm excited about is the shortcuts using natural language. And the reason I'm excited about it is because I don't do shortcuts. I've tried them. I've gotten some pre-programmed ones, but the pre-programmed ones seem to be a lot of work in order to get when I can just push the app. But when I've tried to create ones myself, I haven't been very successful with it. And so I'm anxious to try out creating shortcuts with natural language as soon as I can find a reason for doing one. That's always been the problem. You know, when it rains and the sun goes down and the dog is barking, please turn on this music. I mean, I can't think of all of the different kinds of things that would be meaningful for me to create a shortcut with all of these different choices in it. And that's me. I mean, I'm sort of push a button, get a reaction, push a different button, get another action. So yeah, I just don't think in complicated chains like shortcuts. So, but I'm anxious to try it out with this situation. Bob.
Well, I've long awaited for the S Lady to have the ability to look into my address book, which is now called Contacts. When I ask CarPlay for direction to my friend Joe Blank's house, his name and address is in my contacts already. She should be able to have the ability to look there. Or how about directions to my hotel for tonight? That information's in my calendar app. Look there and find it and give me those directions. This new flyover business may be great, but what I really need to know is when to turn left. I will be delighted if the S Lady can help me find the photo that I'm thinking about and tell me the date, time, and location, along with the people in the frame. And having the ability to do cleanup, I think photos cleanup is good, very good now. If it gets even better, so much the best, so much the better. Now I'm going to turn it back to Marty and his dog to help us close out the show for this half-hour podcast.
Well, let's find out where we can find everybody. So let's go ahead and start with Chris.
Hey, I am Chris.Wesselman on Threads and Instagram, and Blue Sky and Flickr. I'm Chris W47-AZ for Arizona. Peter?
I am at Ppetto, P-P-E-T-T-O, most everywhere. Insta, Facebook, and most of all major and second tier socials. I don't regularly check those, but they hopefully still ping me when you send me something there. They did yesterday with one that I haven't been to in about 6 months. So at Ppetto.
I can be found at a few different websites. tmug.com, that's the website for the Tucson Macintosh user group. My own personal website, which is thinkbob.com. And also my photographic website, dangerousbobphotography.com. You can find me there and find links to get a hold of me. So, how about you, Charlie?
I would say meetup at cyberchuck.org is one of the emails that I use that's a major alias that I use for a lot of interactions.
And you can find me at thepodtalk.net. That's and also check out through the socials at Gencius, Gencius, on Blue Sky and Mastodon. And you can connect with me there and also find me on the Old Mac Gang as you will be listening. And thank you for doing that. Apologizing for my dog who interrupted the show every time I wanted to talk, not because she misses the tulsing, the lovely sounds of my voice. It's because there's thunder and rain going outside and she hates that. So we had maybe a sixth Old Mac Gang member on the show tonight for that purpose. Thanks for hanging out with us, the Old Mac Gang. If today's show sparked something useful, share it with other Apple users in your life who've been wondering what's going on with this WWDC and what can happen. So thanks for joining us. And because you're listening, because you're watching, you're now part of the Old Mac Gang.